Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of Scale Up Radio, the podcast inspired by the entrepreneurial scale up system and designed to make navigating our scale up journeys that little bit easier by learning from each other's experiences. I'm Granger Forson, and on this episode of the show, I'm joined by Jon Quinn of Gecko with his amazing watch strap business. Today, we explore Jon's journey from eBay beginnings, branding strategies, and managing growth challenges to his ambitious future goals. To ensure you don't miss any inspirational future episodes, do subscribe to Scale Up Radio wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, you can nominate a guest for Scale Up Radio if you know someone with an interesting scale-up story. You can find out how in the show notes. So, let's now dive into the inspiring journey of strategic growth, branding excellence, controlling supply chains, and entrepreneurial resilience with Jon Quinn. So, hello, Jon Quinn. Welcome to Scale Up Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi there. My name's Jon Quinn. I'm the founder and managing director of Gecko Limited, which is an online retailer specializing in watches and replacement watch straps.
Excellent. Wow. Everybody likes a nice watch, and especially with good watch straps, etc. So tell us about how long have you been going? How big are you now?
So our main product is replacement watch straps rather than watches. And I started selling them as a hobby in 2010. So I started on eBay just for fun. So when I started, actually, I was buying and selling watches. So I would look for watches so second-hand watches that people had listed on eBay and hadn't done a very good job of listing them. And I've always been interested in watches. So I would know that the watch that they were selling was probably a lot better than they'd kind of made it out to be. So let's say the photo, and this is we're talking sort of 15 years ago when people didn't have camera phones, and so people would be using digital cameras and they wouldn't know how to use the macro function, this kind of thing. So anyway, just as a bit of fun, I was buying these up and then reselling them, not to make money, on eBay, and I'd do one a month or something like that, and it would just give me some satisfaction to buy something for, let's say, £10 and relist it, rephotograph it, and all the rest of it, and sell it for £100 or something like that. And as I was doing that, I would buy some spare parts. So sometimes I would have to change the strap on the watch, or change the crystal on the watch, or change the battery and things like that. So I had an account with a wholesaler, and I bought some watch straps just to have as kind of spares, and thought, actually, I could just sell these on eBay, and we'll see how that goes. And the thing with eBay, and you can still do it now, but I mean, there's more competition now, really. But you can get a feel quite quickly on eBay for the size of a market or the size of a competitor's business. So just by looking at, let's say there's a competitor, or there's somebody that's selling a product that you're interested in, and they've got 100 listings, and the average price is about 50 quid, and you can see from their feedback that they're selling, let's say they're getting 100 feedbacks a month or something like that. You could quite quickly just get a kind of scale, a feel for the scale of the business. And I could see that there was a few other people selling watch straps on eBay at the time, and it seemed like they were turning over a reasonable amount. So I listed a couple of the watch straps that I'd bought as part of this sort of hobby exercise, and they sold. And it just went from there, really. I just saw, there's a bit of a gap in the market, a bit of an opportunity. And at that point, it was just for fun, really. But when I was much younger, I did, if somebody had said to me, what would you like to do when you grow up? I would have said, I'd like to have my own business. And they'd say, oh, that's great. What do you want to do? And I would have had no idea. And so, I would say, well, I've got no idea, really, but I just quite like the idea of my own business. I went to college and studied electronics, and then I went to university and continued with electronics and got into software. And the idea of having my own business kind of fell by the wayside when the reality of life and getting a job and that kind of thing. I never really thought that I would be able to do anything in the technology kind of field. I wasn't good enough, I suppose, to be able to do that. I didn't have the idea of what I could do. Anyway, so as time went on, I got just gradually more fed up with being an engineer, and so yeah, felt the calling elsewhere, I suppose, really, and the interesting watches I'd always had from being a teenager, kind of, that started to come out, and so it was just me on my own in the spare room in 2010.
Yeah.
And we've grown to 17 members of staff, and that's been a gradual process. So we got to about that same kind of number, possibly a couple more, probably around the sort of 2019 kind of time, just before COVID. And then COVID happened, and obviously just things changed for everybody. And so we lost a few members of staff around that time. People, realized that they wanted to work from home and they wanted to do different things, that kind of thing. And then we'll maybe touch on it later, but we made some not horrendous mistakes, but some of the hiring decisions that we made weren't perfect, and so that was just before COVID, I think, when we had that kind of thing. So we've had a few rocky years, kind of before COVID, and then kind of after it. And so in terms of the members of staff and the size of the business, I think every single year we have increased turnover. Some years more than others, but the staff's probably been kind of consistent, probably for around the past sort of 6 or so years, around that kind of number, between 15 and 20, that kind of number.
Yeah,
and that's where we are now. Yeah.
And what sort of number of SKUs is it, to get the terminology right?
Yeah.
How many sort of what's the
right.
sort of volume are you turning through?
So the number of SKUs that we've got I don't know the exact number, but off the top of my head, it'll be somewhere around 2,000. So SKU, that's a stock keeping unit. That's what that is. So that's basically each item's got its own SKU, which is like the barcode number or whatever you want to call it. So that's the unique identifier for the product. We've probably got around 2,000 or 3,000, something like that, which is probably too many. The good old 80-20 rule applies here very much, and
Yes.
we could quite easily, and that's one of the things that we haven't been disciplined enough about, is clearing out the old stuff. So actually, just before we had this call now, I was just working through a spreadsheet of items that we need to take off. So it's much more interesting to buy new products than it is to take off the old ones. And so we anyway.
Not quite as exciting, is it? Removing old ones and deciding.
No, not really. But it does. I mean, it does feel good, because there's things that are just hanging around, and it frees up space.
So describe more your business model too. Are you totally online? How does somebody buy? Do you pack and service? How to pack and ship?
Yes.
What's your business model?
Yes. Okay. So, I was quite fortunate, I think, really. I'm just trying to think back to sort of how things were around, sort of 2009, 2010, when I started the business. So the internet was quite different. So if somebody wanted to buy a replacement watch strap on Amazon at that time, there was very, very few on there, like 50 or something like that. On Amazon.co.uk, it would have been very, very, very small numbers. eBay was the reason for that, I think, was that the barrier to entry for eBay was very low. Anybody. So I've said this to people before. From day one, I was an international. It's an international business. I'm an international online retailer. That's how you could describe yourself. It's like, wow. And 40 or 50 years ago, that would have been unthinkable, for a man in his bedroom to be doing that, really, I think. But eBay makes it possible. All you need is an eBay account, and to tick the box that says international postage, and you're an international business. So from day one, that's what we've been, and that's how I started. And I was quite fortunate, I think, to be able to start on eBay at that time and to get onto Amazon. So eBay and Amazon made it possible. If I had a shop on the high street, we wouldn't have. You couldn't have this business with a shop on the high street. So the demand is there. It's a niche, but the demand is there when you've got the worldwide audience. And so the internet kind of makes it possible. And eBay and Amazon, the marketplaces, that made it possible for me to start this business with next to no money. So we've borrowed very little money. So we have borrowed money, but very little, really. I started the business with £1,000 or something like that, and was quite disciplined in, that's the money for the business. And that's, so I got to the point where, so I was working full time as a software engineer, and I had a mortgage, a wife, and 2 young children. And my wife wasn't working at that time, so I was the sole breadwinner. So it wasn't an easy decision to give up work and give it a go. And I spoke to quite a few people about it at the time, and nobody said, John, that sounds like a really good idea. What that? Yeah, I can see that working. Nobody said that. Everybody was just totally perplexed, didn't get it, and thought I was mad. But I knew that if it didn't really work out, I could go back to engineering, and we had enough money to last for about a year. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a go for a year. Yeah, I had that money that I put aside, and so I started the business. So anyway, you asked me what is the business. So it's online retail of replacement watch straps effectively. And we started off through eBay and Amazon, and that made it possible for us to grow quite quickly to a reasonable scale to, £1 or £2 million turnover. We were doing that pretty much just on the marketplaces. And at the same time as doing that, we were building up our own online presence. So we've got a few websites. The main one is Watch Gecko, so that's the main retail website. And that has been a functioning e-commerce site since probably 2012, something like that. So it was in a very basic form. Initially, I did it myself. And then I think 2013, 2014, we got an agency involved. They redesigned the website, moved it to a different platform. And at that time, our website would have, and it still is, but the competitions come on leaps and bounds since then. But at that time, it was reasonably groundbreaking, I would say, and was head and shoulders above the competition. So one of the things that's always been really important for me is the way that the product's presented. So the quality of the photography is that something we just will not compromise on that. And you were asking me about what do we do, etc. So we try and do as much as we can, well, everything almost really, but certainly as much as we can ourselves in-house. So everything apart from actually making the product, we would do ourselves. So the photography, that's always been in-house. We did try very briefly to work with a photographer, and it was incredibly expensive, and the results were not great. So watch photography and still life e-commerce photography, again, maybe not so much now, and there are the companies that will do it for you, and you can buy equipment and all the rest of it. But it's still not easy, and it's still quite a specialist. And 10 or 15 years ago, it was even more so. But shipping the orders out, so we do that. So we're all in one office building in Tewkesbury. That's where we're based. Everything's done here. So the e-commerce listings, admin, accounts. Although we do work with an accounts partner externally to help with that. But yeah, shipping the orders out, answering the phone, answering customer inquiries, listing the products. So we don't do any website development ourselves now. We did do that for a while, but we found it was more cost effective to subcontract that out to specialist agencies.
And still through Amazon, do you do managed by Amazon, or do you just manage the orders and then you ship it out from your warehouse?
So there was a time, I don't know the exact date, but let's say 7 or so years ago, when Amazon sales were more than just over half of our revenues. So by the time I'd got the business to the point where it had outgrown the spare room, it was pretty much 100% eBay. So one bloke on his own in his spare room can be pretty busy just selling stuff on eBay, and so that was me. And turnover at that time would have been about £100,000 or something like that, and that was for the product that I had and the margins and all the rest of it. That was my limit then at that point. I hadn't got any more space. That was the capacity. That was the limit. So if I want to take it further than that, need to move it away from the house, and I wanted to do that anyway because I wanted to employ people. I could see, I knew my limits, and I knew the potential for the business, and I knew I was holding it back. So we needed to do something. So anyway, so you mentioned Amazon, and I can't quite remember what. Okay. So it leads me on to a story about Amazon. So we got to the point really where Amazon was about half the business, just over half. I mean, we were selling pretty much worldwide with Amazon. So
right.
I mean, so I have a love-hate relationship with Amazon. So so anybody, and you could do it today. Anyone can. You open a selling account on Amazon.co.uk. I just want to sell to the UK. Amazon, please. That's fine. And what they do is they give you a European account. So basically, from day one, you can list on Amazon France, Amazon Germany, Amazon Italy, Amazon Spain, wherever it is, and then with a couple of clicks, you can list on Amazon USA and Amazon Japan, and God knows where else. So so very early on, so one of the first employees actually of the company was a French student. So the first few students, I employed 3 students from the University of Gloucestershire. And very soon after then, a friend of mine came and joined me, and he's still with me today. And one of the students was French, actually, and so, one of his main tasks was to list all of the products that we had on the UK Amazon Marketplace in France. And then by using Google Translate, I mean, he was pretty switched on, so he was good. He was able to pretty much do the ones for Italy and Spain, and just with a bit of Googling and Google Translate and that kind of thing, you can pretty much get, do as good for a product listing, it's fine. So we had listings in all of those EU countries. We were selling on Amazon USA and Amazon Japan as well. So we hired a native Japanese speaker, and she came work for us part-time, and she still works for us actually, but not in that same capacity. And we were selling a reasonable number of watch straps to Japan. So the market for British, we're a British brand, but the product isn't British. But the Japanese market still, and the Japanese do like collecting things and watches and that kind of thing. So we were big in Japan, as 80s pop stars would have once said. But the thing with Amazon is it's Amazon's customer, not yours.
Yeah.
So that's a very important point. And so I remember one thing. So one of the things when in the very early days when I first started selling on Amazon, and I needed to contact them, and you basically log into your seller account, and with a couple of clicks you get to a thing and you can contact them one way or the other. So if you want, and you can speak to them on the phone, but there's no phone number. There's a button to request a callback. So you enter your phone number and you press a button and you get a callback, and it's fine. You can have a bit of a conversation. After doing that a few times, you kind of realise that they're very good at speaking to you, and how do I phrase it? They will respond to your inquiry, but they don't necessarily answer the question. So you can have contact with them, and they're very polite, and they'll go through a process and blah 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 blah. But they don't. Often they're just completely ineffective. And still to this day, I don't know whether it's actually a deliberate thing. Whether Amazon's got a room full of people that are busy talking to people, but not actually solving the problem. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is, if Amazon doesn't actually want to talk to you for some reason because they haven't given you a phone number, what happens is your privilege to speak to them on the phone is removed. And so when you go to the contact us thing, suddenly the call me back button is no longer there, and you have to fill in a form. So they just start to make it difficult. So it's the power kind of thing, isn't it? So and you realize quite quickly who's the boss kind of thing. And anyway, so one day we came. So prior to this happening, we'd started to just have niggle after niggle, and it was just taking up a lot of time. And probably at this point, the amount of business that we're doing on Amazon is kind of declining. And we didn't want to be, selling on Amazon is fine, but we never wanted to be a slave to Amazon. We never wanted to, and there were times where we started to lose faith, really. And anyway, the final straw was that they notified us that there was an intellectual property violation on one of the products on our account, and that they were, I can't remember how they phrased it, but basically our selling privileges were removed. And so just like that, all of the trade on Amazon stopped. And if that had happened at the time when over half of the turnover was on Amazon, and let's say we were investing in the futures Amazon, this kind of thing, I don't know personally, but I know of people who were in that situation where basically their business was just on Amazon, and then Amazon decides, do you know what, actually we don't like you anymore, or we don't need you anymore, or something like that. Yeah. And it took us, we've only last year actually got the account back in a functioning state. And I never had a straight, and this is so it was the third internal Amazon rep who managed to get it restated. 2 of her previous people had failed to do it. And she told us kind of off the record that, actually they'd made a mistake. And it shouldn't. There was no issue at all. And for years we'd been trying to get. We just gave up and just kind of did. It was like it's just not worth it. So so anyway, so how much of the business now is Amazon? Very little, but we are actually now trying to, with our eyes wide open, because there's business there to be had.
Yeah.
We can work with some specialists who can take away a lot of the pain. And it's kind of free advertising for the brand, because so many people start or end their shopping journey on Amazon. So somebody will look there, they'll look for something, they'll think, oh, that's very interesting. It's out of stock possibly, or this is a brand I haven't heard of. I'll go, and then so they'll do that, and they might buy it on Amazon. And that's fine if they do. Obviously, we're going to make some money, but Amazon takes quite a cut. Yeah. One of the useful things with Amazon is the logistics side of it. So they will fulfill they don't have to. You can do it either way, and we used to do a bit of both. But that's let's say I'm at the situation where I've run out of space in the warehouse downstairs. How am I going to continue to grow the business without finding some of the? It's actually if Amazon's doing a load of the things, so that's quite an easy way to grow. And there is some overlap, I think, with the Amazon customer and our own current. So we are possibly diluting. That's one of the concerns that we've had internally: is is everybody just going to shift from buying on the site? But I think it's a different demographic for the most part.
Right.
So I'm not too concerned about that. So anyway, So where is Amazon now?
Yeah.
It's a small part of the business, thankfully. eBay is a fraction of the business as well. It's the vast majority is on our own websites, and the Watch Gecko one's the predominant one. The second one is Ulu Diver, which is, again, it's a replacement watch, so a specialist kind of replacement watch strap website, both selling internationally. And they're both hosted on the Shopify platform, which we re-platformed across to a year or two ago.
So you built a business. You started on Amazon. You started on eBay. Yeah, so on eBay, went to Amazon, and you recognized to move off and to grow, direct through e-commerce, through your own platform or websites structures. So what makes you different, do you think? What makes you, what do you strive to be best at that drives customers to come looking for you and to generate the growth that you've had?
If we go back a long time ago, when we were predominantly on eBay and Amazon, and the French student that I mentioned earlier was working for us. So we, at that time, we were selling pretty much just generic products on it. So if we just say a generic watch strap on eBay, that was basically what we were doing, and the average price of it would have been £10 or £15, something like that. And there's lots of other people selling generic watch straps on eBay for £10 or £15, and there still are. And some of the people that we were competing against 10 or 15 years ago, they're still there selling the same kind of generic thing at that same kind of price point. And there's a business there to be had, and that's fine. But there's just a row of them doing the same kind of thing. One of the things so Simon, the French chap, that's his name. So one of the things that Simon felt quite strongly about was that we should brand our products. We've got a brand name, we should be branding the products. And I was skeptical about it for some reason. Exactly what the reason was, I don't know. Possibly I didn't feel we needed to do it. If you're buying a replacement watch strap, some people won't necessarily want the brand on there because they want it to kind of look like it matches the original watch, possibly. Some of the straps that we were buying at that time were generic products. So one of the things, so actually, if we just go a little bit before that, so there's two things that were fundamental, I think. So I used to buy the straps from distributors in the UK, which is the same place anybody could buy them from. So if you wanted to buy some watch straps today from somebody in the UK, you could phone up one of these suppliers and you could get some, and they'd be either unbranded or they would have that supplier's name on the back. And this is when I'd been doing it for the business for a few months. We're back at that point now. I had quite a good, so it was a new product, quite a new style, and it was quite a popular product. And I bought 10, something like that. And they sold, within a few weeks, I'd sold all of the 10. And I called the supplier, oh, hi there, yeah, I'd just like to place another order. Can I have 20, please, this time? Oh, yeah, it's been popular, that one. We're out of stock. Oh, okay. Oh, dear. I'm out of stock too. That's done quite well for me. When are you going to have them? This is me asking them. Yeah, it's going to be 2 months. Something like this, I'm thinking I can't wait 2 months for the product to, that's about one of my best selling things. And so I realized at that time I'm going to have to, my supply chain, I'm limited now by somebody else's, let's say, incompetence in them not being able to manage their stock properly. So it's not enough me being incompetent and being out of stock, but then if my supplier is the same, we're going to have problems here. So I started to look for basically the factories that were making these things. And it was remarkable. I mean, it's even easier now, but I mean, it was remarkably easy just with a couple of clicks and a Google search kind of thing to find lists of factories in the Far East that make replacement watch straps. And I contacted a few of them and got, within a few days, but possibly even overnight, maybe even, I got a reply, and a very positive reply. And here's our catalogue attached. It would be great to do business with you, but let me know if you've got any queries or something like this. If the price list wasn't attached, I would have just written back to them and said, what's the MOQ, what's the price, so the MOQ. Let's say I was buying one strap in the UK for £10, something like this, but I only had to buy one, I guess, and I could sell it for 20. I might have to buy 100 from the Far East supplier, but they'd be £1.50, instead of £10 or something like that. So massively different. And actually, 100 watch straps doesn't take up that much room. And actually, if I get the right style, I could sell that quite quickly. Actually, it'd be good to have 100 because then I won't be out of stock. And if they haven't really cost me that much money, even if it doesn't really sell, I can still sell it for half the price that I would have been selling the other one for. And I'm still making this. This is getting interesting now, And then the key thing then, so there's three things, I suppose. So being in charge of the supply chain, being able to go at a very favorable price, and also then being able to customize the design. So I've got my own product at a much better price in the quantity that I need. And so that was probably the first sort of key moment, I think, probably. And then the one after that is Simon impressing on us the need to brand the product and to establish the brand. So it's not just the product that we're selling; it's a branded product, and it's a thing.
Yeah.
And to increase the price. So there was some prices, and because we were just prior to that, we're selling generic product at the same that looks the same as everybody else, and let's say they're charging £10. I wouldn't think that we could charge much more than £10. Certainly on eBay, because people are just going to search by price, and they've got them all there. They're all the same. They're just going to buy the cheapest one or whatever it is. And he gave us the conviction to increase the price because no ours is better. And with our brand name on it, then it's different, even if it is very similar to something else. So and people bought them, people continued to buy them at the inflated price. And so those two things probably. So what makes us different, I guess you were saying. So certainly at that point, what made us different from the competitors that we had at that time was that we were buying from the factories that were making them, we were getting them much cheaper. And we're able to customize it and make it our own and establish the brand, whereas other people are just content to sell the same generic stuff because it's easy, I suppose, So, and I get that, and I can remember talking to family members, and I would say, I've sent £1,000 to a chap in Hong Kong that I've never met, and they're just like looks of disbelief. You've done what? You've sent £1,000. This kind of thing. It's like, well, yeah, of course, because I need to pay him. And have you received the goods then, John? No, they're making them. I'm going to get them next month. Well, you can wave goodbye to that £1,000, that kind of thing.
But what's interesting, you also took control of the quantities, which allowed you not to run out of stock as well.
Right.
So okay, brilliant. Well, fantastic. So some really pivotal moments there, and some really good thoughts and advice for people building a retail business online. So let's think about the journey a bit more, and some of the key elements that we need to think about as business owners. So you mentioned staff and hiring staff and the learning from that. What's gone well, what didn't go well, and what did you learn around the hiring?
So we've always done a lot of the recruitment ourselves, and for the most part, it's gone well, I think. And we haven't had any disasters, but it hasn't always been perfect. I haven't worked out actually what the kind of success fail ratio, maybe 50-50. So I don't know, something like that. But there was a period of time around that sort of 2018, 2019 time where we grew quite quickly in terms of the headcount. And I can remember talking to a colleague about the plans for the future and how we were going to get there and this kind of thing. And one of the things I can remember saying is we're just employing more people. If we get more people, they're doing more work. and their work will then lead to more sales. So it'll just happen, won't it? But obviously the bit that I didn't kind of realize at that time is that, okay, well, that's fine, you can get more people, but somebody's going to have to manage them, and you're going to have to train them, and you might get it wrong, and you might spend a lot of time, and it might take you a while to realize that you've got it wrong. So we kind of create, and that won't then necessarily lead to the extra sales. So then that's going to squeeze the finances. So it's going to be harder to pay them, and something else might happen as well, which makes doing business a bit more difficult. Let's say, So, and I remember, I think it was reading about Netflix. So I think, and this is a long time ago when Netflix, they were doing the DVD thing, weren't they? And before they were doing the streaming thing, I think there was a time when they had some massive cull of their workforce. I think I'm remembering this correctly. And so there would have been a department where a guy had 10 staff under him, and then a few days later he's got 2 or something like this. And Netflix kind of turned the business around, and this is me remembering it might not be quite right, but it kind of tells the story really. He's then approached, it's great news, the business is growing again, so we can take a few more members of staff on, we'll build that team. And he's like, no way, I don't want them back. We're far more efficient now. It's just me, Stephen, Bob, or whatever it is. We're fine as we are. I don't want those other guys. But so that, and what I'm trying to say there is, having, and it's only like one extra person possibly who isn't quite the right person, that then distracts people who are the right people from doing what they should be doing. And so getting the right staff is really, really, really key, I think. And I don't think there's no guaranteed way to do that, I think. You just have to do your best, I think, and if there are, and deal with problems quickly if problems arise, try and nip them in the bud. I guess so. I think in the US they have more of a sort of hire and fire mentality, don't they? And that's not so much the case here. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to do things, and it is costly and time consuming to recruit people, but having the wrong person in the business really is very damaging, I think. And it's impossible to put any kind of figure on it, but I could guess that if we hadn't made those wrong recruitment decisions, we would be in a much stronger position than we are. But that's life, isn't it? You just have to accept that. I think some you win, some you lose, and you just have to try and get it right.
It's interesting you say about becoming efficient by cutting back. There's a great tale in Toyota, and the Toyota line manager goes to the plant manager and says, we've got a 10% increase in sales coming up. I need a 10% increase in people. And the plant manager turns around and says, if I needed an abacus, I would buy an abacus. Please go away and work out how you can do 10% sales with 10% less people, because we want those people to go elsewhere to help the business grow. So actually any process can be challenged to make more efficient. Sometimes as we're growing and we take on staff, we forget about that opportunity to really do that. So absolutely. Very, very good. I mean, so, motivating people, is really important. You've got a team, around you, 17. How do you motivate people? How do you keep people aligned for the direction of the business and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, it's not easy, and everybody's different, aren't they? So the things that motivate some people don't motivate others. And I remember someday, I can't remember who it was, like starting to talk about the culture, what's the culture of your business kind of thing, and not really, for a long time, not really understanding it. What are your values? I think there was a time, I don't know whether people still talk about this kind of stuff as much as they did, but I think there was a time when everybody was talking about culture and values and this kind of stuff, which obviously is important, but I'd never, maybe it's just the circles that I was socializing in, maybe, or coming into contact with, that those kind of things just weren't discussed that much. So anyway, basically it's the people, isn't it? That's what the culture is. And you can't really, the culture isn't me. I don't dictate that on people. I don't tell people what to do. But if I'm making the recruitment decisions, then I'm kind of in control of what kind of a culture we build. And so that's where then and it kind of evolves over time, I think, doesn't it? And change does take time. So ideally you would have, so I think I've possibly got the book on my shelf. It's Jim Collins, isn't it, who talks about getting the right people on the bus
Yep.
and then deciding where, don't worry about where, and then decide where you're going to go. And I think that is right. And I think there's definitely some truth in that. How you would actually do that, I don't know, because if you don't really know where the bus is going to go, I don't know how you know whether you've got the right kind of people.
Yeah, and the analysis in Good to Great is actually on very large companies, so they've got that flexibility in that.
Yeah, it's not the same, is it? But I understand. I understand what you're saying. And we've tried numerous kind of things, across the board. I think the important. So I would have read it somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, where somebody would say, one of the key thing with HR, I think the most common reason for somebody leaving a business is it's the relationship that they have with their immediate superior. That's the thing that's really key.
Agreed.
So one of the things I can remember, so this is again, if we go back to the sort of key points in the business. So when we'd made those hires in quite a short space of time and hadn't quite got it right, at that point I was managing everybody. So I was kind of managing 10 or 12 people, and then that grew by another 5. So we're kind of approaching that kind of, and that's too many then. I can't manage all those kind of people. And we didn't really have any formal structure in place. And a lot of the people that we had were very young. So we'd taken people straight out of school. So you've got, reasonable number of the workforce. They're only about 20, that kind of age, and never really worked anywhere before. They were skilled and they were keen, but you don't know what you don't know. And there was an awful lot that they didn't know, and they didn't realize they didn't know it. Anyway, one of the things. So COVID was a bit disruptive in this. We started a process of putting in place a teams structure. So we split the business into 3 teams, and we wanted people to step up and say, "I'll be the team leader." And we went through a process of that, and we started doing Belbin tests on. Or Belbin, not tests so much, but Belbin.
Yep.
The Belbin process, that analyzes that kind of thing. And we've restarted doing it again recently. And I was looking back at the reports that we'd done the first time round, and they were dated January 2020. And so thinking back, I can remember, because I don't know when we had the first lockdown, but was it February or March? I can't remember. So a few months after we'd started this building process, and the team, then suddenly, I can remember. I mean, it wasn't quite this, but I've got this sort of visual picture of, half of the staff almost running out of the door with their computer under their arm, to start working from home. This wonderful opportunity for everybody to take control of their lives, kind of thing. And I remember thinking, what do I do now? This is how do we manage this? We had started a bit of working from home, so there were some people who were doing a bit of working from home, and obviously we're online, so we could do it. We were lucky, really, in relation to COVID. We were very lucky. So I think understanding. So we've got a common goal, and obviously everybody needs to be focused on that common goal, and people need to be aligned. But you can't motivate everybody in the same way. So and again, it goes back then to the relationship that whoever's the team leader or the line manager, that person needs to understand how to motivate the people in their team. And so, for the most part, I leave it for them to do that. So try and get people who are all on the same page, but not everybody is always. And so having a really good understanding of, but with some people you'll never really know, and you just gotta. And for a lot of people, it is just a job, and. I don't think there's anything that you can do about that. I think that's just the way it is, and so you've got to be accepted. And so there was a period of time where I didn't want it to be, because I still don't really, I don't really want it to be like that for people. But I wanted to make some fundamental changes in the way that we thought about holidays and working hours and the way that people would be paid and this kind of stuff. And it's just too radical for some people. That's not what they want. It's like, what time do I need to arrive? When can I go home? How much am I going to get paid? And how do I book my holidays?
Well, that's probably a function, though, of how we educate our children as well. We get into that structure and activity. It's not till probably when you get out of your 20s and 30s that you start to really challenge some of that thinking. A lot of people, just want that. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it, and what time, etc. So, cash. Final sort of business around cash. Cash is really important in every business. You even got cash tied up in your stock in the warehouse. How do you manage the cash and the finances of the business? What's your hints and tips?
I mean, I'll just tell you what I did. So, this won't work for everybody. It isn't necessarily right, and somebody would have a different way of doing things, and they'd possibly be more successful. I don't know, but this is what I did. I kind of managed the business's finances the same kind of way that I would my own. So I wouldn't be somebody who would go out and get a bank loan to buy a new car or something like that, for example. So. We've got a mortgage on our house, so I've never been concerned about having a mortgage on a house. That's fine. It's an appreciating asset, so it's fine to borrow money against that, and you can get a very, very good rate on that, can't you? So we never borrowed any money to buy any. That's not true. Actually, we did borrow a bit of money actually when there was a time when we felt that we'd got some opportunity. So we have borrowed some money, but I only did it once, and then we've never done it again. So what would my tips be? Find a high margin product that's easy to sell, and take full advantage of that. That's kind of what we've done.
And how do you keep an eye on the sort of day-to-day cash in the business and the ability to, cover payroll, cover what needs to come through, managing stock?
Well, it's easier now because we've got more of a buffer. I mean, so back in the day, I can remember I've been in a conversation with some relatives, and I was telling them that month I was going to have to put, I can't remember how much it was, £10,000 or £20,000 from my own money back into the business account so that we could do the payroll. I can remember that, and they were concerned at hearing me say that, but I knew that it was only a temporary thing, and a few weeks later or whatever it would have been, I'd be in a position to. Yeah. We used to have an unfortunate situation where we would, towards the end of the month, we'd have to pay a load of money to some of the couriers that we use for VAT, and it was VAT is quarterly, but every month we're paying the couriers for because we're importing a lot of stuff. So every month you're basically. You're kind of lending money to HMRC every month to then get it back at the end of the 3-month period. That's kind of what it felt like we were doing. So let's say it's £20,000. It's done through DHL. We use DHL to import most of the stuff. So at the end of the month, you'd have a 30 grand bill from DHL. 10,000 of it would be for the freight costs, and 20 grand would be VAT. And you get that month 1, month 2, month 3. So that's 60 grand of VAT, and then you get the VAT back at the month after, month 4 kind of thing, So there'd be some months where actually towards and then you've got the payroll obviously as well, and then if there's any other bills or something like that. So it was just one of those slightly, this is probably what it would have been. I knew I was fine because I know I'm going to get however much it is back from HMRC, and we used to get money back from HMRC. That's the thing, because we were paying a lot for import VAT, and we do have a good proportion of sales in the UK, but the majority of the sales aren't in the UK, so there's no VAT to pay on those. So actually, we were paying out some months more in the import VAT, so we'd get money back anyway.
Yeah.
So cash flow was hard back in those kind of times, but it's got easier as time's gone on. Certainly, as we've been a bit more disciplined with stock, and so. We had a lot of money tied up in stock. I've never been too worried about that. I've always felt that stock's an investment. So we're fortunate, and if you've got a product that's got a pretty long shelf life like ours does, and it's a high margin, and there's always some way that you can offload it for at least what you've paid for it, which has always been the case for us. I've never really been too worried about it, but more recently we have been more disciplined, and that's enabled us to build up a cash buffer of a reasonable size. So we're in a good place now. So I don't really need to worry about it too much.
Good. So, in 5 years' time, we'll catch up and have a coffee. Though we'll probably meet long before then because we do other things together, meeting now and then. But let's meet up in 5 years' time, have a coffee. Let's look back over the last 5 years. What's happened professionally and personally for you for the next 5 years to be successful.
So before we had the call, you said a few other questions that you were going to ask me, and you said that one, and I thought I should have anticipated that, because I haven't thought about that. So it is something that I used to think about quite a bit, and people would ask you that question in the hope that it would help you to then plan for those 5 years. So that's where you want to be. Okay, so how are you going to get there? And I would talk to members of staff, and this would be an interview question that I would use, and I'd be looking for a good answer from that person when I asked them that question. So it's never really been about the money for me, this business. It was, I wanted to change to my day job. I didn't want to continue doing what I was doing. I felt that I had some skills that weren't being used. I felt I'd seen an opportunity, really, and I was just really excited to grasp that opportunity and see what I could do and take it as far as I could. And it was never really about the money. So I've never been thinking, I want to buy a Ferrari and sit on a yacht or something like this. That's I've never really been. So, but as time goes on, you do. I mean, obviously, you need to pay the bills, obviously, don't you? But as time goes on, you do think, well, obviously, I need to be rewarded now because I've made a lot of sacrifices over the last 10 years. And so there is a financial element to it, and obviously, you need to run. If you want to pay your staff and keep your staff and do right by them, you need to be. The business needs to be successful. It needs to be profitable. So you need to be disciplined in that sense. So one of the things a few years ago, and this would have been at that same kind of time, kind of around the sort of pre-COVID time, I think. I don't know how I came across it. I haven't really seen it. I mean, I assume it's still going, but I haven't really seen it so much recently. But there was I think it's done by the Sunday Times, and they call it the Fast Track 100 or something like that. It's called, I think. And these are like the fastest growing small businesses in the UK or something like this. It's an awards thing, and they publish a list, and then they pick the best one or something like that. And you would look at some of the brands that are in there, and some you had heard of, some you wouldn't. And if they're ones that you haven't heard of, I would overlook and read the story and be inspired by it and that kind of thing. And the entry requirement, to even get on the list or to be considered for the list. So I'm kind of thinking one day I'd like to be on that list. That's what I'm thinking. And then you look at what the criteria are to be considered for the list, and I don't know whether there was a number of staff. There possibly was, but there was one thing that stuck out to me. It's £5 million turnover. So if you're not ticking however many boxes there were, one of them was the £5 million. You can't even fill in. Don't bother filling in the application form, John. You're not going to get on the list. Never mind win the award. So in the back of my mind at that point, and still now, because we haven't hit that level yet, it's I need to run for your business to be considered credible by that organisation. You need to have that level. So that's now my. This is just for me, and I'm not dictating to anybody, but that's now my measure of a credible business. It needs to be turning, and I think that's fair enough. Once you get to that point, you if the business is normal kind of thing, the level of profit, then it gets interesting, doesn't it? Then I suppose then for the sale of the business and for takeovers and this kind of stuff, you're just in a certain kind of league. So where would I'd very, if I would be very disappointed if in 5 years' time we're not turning over at least £5 million.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So that's kind of where I would like to be, and involvement with the business, I'd still very much like to be involved. I don't need to be involved as much as I am now. So probably, for me, if the business is doing at least 5 million, and I'm not as involved as I currently am now, but I'm still involved, and I'm able to spend more time on holiday, that would be a nice place to be, I think.
Brilliant. Well, John, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating conversation about the growth of your business and taking it from a hobby on eBay, taking that risk, and when other people saying, why you want to do this, that doesn't make sense, and taking that plunge and going for it, believing in yourself, believing in what you can do, growing, all the way, the difficulty of pandemic, but now to 17 staff. We talked about finding the right people, and how do you find the right people, and motivating the people. And I think that's really important, how you talked about having a common goal and understanding, the relationship that your leaders need to have with their people, because that's part of, making sure the team grows and then they feel that they're part of it. But listening to people, what's been really interesting is also about how people have come with ideas and you've picked up on those ideas and implemented them. The branding of your product, understanding about supply chain and realizing that actually you could reach out to factories and buy that product direct, and then the ability then to customize it, etc., to come through. And understanding then, the change in the dynamics of moving from eBay and Amazon and moving into your own retail, being able to take it online, the building of that, but understanding that key thing of why do people buy, and having those beautiful pictures, those really ways of making it stand out and making sure that's in house, because that's such an important activity for you. And so it's been really interesting to understand the journey and those key elements that you've done along it and taken control, and how you've moved as the business has grown into key elements of managing and controlling your business. And your 5-year plan to be on the top 100 fastest growing UK businesses. Yeah, fantastic. What a brilliant aspiration. I think that's absolutely awesome. So, Jon, we always finish off with a quick fire round, if we may. So off we go. If you go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Buy a house, which I did do, but I could have bought one when I was a bit younger. So buy a house, that would be an absolutely wonderful investment. People said, I don't know. I don't know why, but at the time, nobody was really saying that, and people were saying start a pension, and it was a bit fashionable to tell young people to start a pension, this kind of thing. So I'd say don't worry about a pension, buy a house. But if there was a young person now wanting the same advice, I don't know whether I'd necessarily give them that same advice, but for me, but that 20 or 30 years ago, that would have been. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
That's great. Books. Any books you'd recommend, either business or non?
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, great book. Yeah. Podcasts. Any that you listen to you'd recommend?
There's one that I'm listening to at the moment, which I'm enjoying, which is called When It Hits the Fan. So it's the BBC Sounds Radio 4 podcast, and I think there's episodes weekly, and it's very entertaining. It's sort of current affairs, PR disasters basically that are in the press, and there's no shortage of them. And every week there's a couple of guys that talk about that, and it's very entertaining. So I'd recommend that.
Brilliant. Onto your mobile phone, any apps that make a difference for you?
Apps that make a difference for me on my mobile phone. I mean, there's so many, isn't there? Where do I start? I'm going to say I don't know what it's called actually. I think it's called. I've got an Android phone, so there's a fitness thing that's built in. I think it might be Google Fit. I'm not sure. But it gives you, rather than just counting your steps, it gives you heart points. And so every day there's a heart point goal. I think it's 40 heart points a day. And it takes into account the type of exercise that you do. So if you go for a leisurely stroll, you don't get very many heart points, but you may have done 10,000 steps, let's say. But if you speed it up a little bit, so I quite like that because it seems like it's a more genuine reflection, and it's a free thing that's built into the phone. So I quite like that.
Brilliant. My favorite question of all, who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
There's an American chap that I worked with a long time ago called Dave Durfee. And he ran a business similar size to mine. It's currently about 20 people. And they did IT and software. They're an IT and software consultancy. And I was fortunate enough to work with them for about a year when I was working as an engineer. And the culture that he'd created with that place always stuck with me, and I've tried to kind of recreate something similar here. So probably him and the way that he ran his business.
Brilliant. Your most successful marketing tactic to date?
Email marketing. I mean, it's a bit of a boring answer, really, but email marketing has been very successful for us, certainly in the past year when we switched over to using a new system. It's simple at the top level, but it's quite time consuming, and there's subtleties to it. But if you get it right, it can be incredibly powerful. And
finally, how can people get hold of you, Jon?
But via our website. So if people are interested in what we've been doing, if you visit the website, the main website is watchgecko.com. So there's an About Us page on there, and there's a timeline of the company, and you can read some of the things that have happened along the way, and you can meet the team, see the photos of the members of staff, and there's a contact us page on there. And if people did want to reach out, they can, or on LinkedIn, you'd be able to find me on LinkedIn. So Jon Quinn on LinkedIn, you'd find me.
Brilliant. Jon, thank you very much for this conversation today.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.